I hope you're well. I suppose, first of all, I want to apologise for not posting more content over the last week or so. I'll be honest with you, I'm knackered. I worked and did the first week, the crash courses. I'm doing them next week as well, and I'm worn out. But I'm going to try and get as much video content done over the next couple of days as I can, and get it posted up. By the way, if you're in my full-time class in the institute, I'll be in contact early next week about doing a class one of the evenings. Now, this video is being made in response to a really lovely interaction I had in one of the Saturday morning classes a few weeks ago, or I don't even know when it was. I'm so tired. And I was talking about, I think it was John Donne's poetry. And I mentioned a technique that Donne employed, and I talked about the effect it has. And one of you put your hand up and asked me a question which I haven't been asked in 26 years of teaching English, and it was a brilliant question, and I'm so grateful for it. And it was like, can you write down the effect that the techniques have? Because I think that'd be useful. I understand it myself, but I find it difficult to put it into words. That's essentially the conversation that we had. So I said, no problem. And I've done that now. And thank you very much for the reminder email, because I did say, I'm always saying I'm going to do stuff, and I mean it, but I'm busier than a busy man in Busyville. So what we've got here is a document which I've put together. And again, for those of you who are in my class, I'll post this on your Moodle. For those of you who are watching this and there's a lot of people watching these videos from all over the place, if you're looking for notes, you can purchase them at pmcbrunner@iCloud. You just email me. I have a price list, various different sets of notes, the mind maps, the poetry, the Macbeth stuff. Just email me and we'll sort something out, okay? So anyway, here we go. So I'm going to go through this now, and I'm going to explain what various techniques mean. And don't forget, folks, when you're preparing for study poetry, they are going to ask you to talk about not just what the poet says, but how the poet says it. So language, technique, style, these are key terms. I think I've made a video already on how to write a poetry essay. If I haven't, I'll do it. But this is something that is absolutely central to your preparation. Okay? So let's get going. So I'll go through this really quickly. I'm just going to read the document, and hopefully you might find it useful. A simile, what does it do? It stimulates the imagination. Now, all of these terms are designed to somehow stimulate the reader. Okay? That means provoke a reaction in the reader. So the simile stimulates the imagination by creating a recognizable, concrete comparison. So that's a lovely definition of a simile. And then you have to be able to explain them. So I picked an Elizabeth Bishop example because she wrote one of my favourites in the poem The Armadillo. And that's when she wrote, describing the impact of the fire balloon which falls from the sky. She wrote, "It splattered like an egg of fire against the cliff behind the house." Look at that, like an egg of fire. Brilliant. You get it. It's so visual, isn't it? An egg, the impact of an egg, and the spread of it, but of fire. So the simile is immediate and dramatic, and that's especially the case when combined with the precision of the verb choice4, the use of onomatopoeia, because splattered is onomatopoeic, and the fact that the lines are written in iambic tetrameter. So there's 4 pairs of syllables, so 8 syllabic beats in the line. And of course, Bishop pays attention to detail in her characteristic way by saying against the house behind the cliff. So that's the kind of commentary that, you're not just saying she's using the simile, but you're talking about the impact, and then how it communicates, how it is related to other techniques to create vivid imagery. So if they're asking about lively style or engaging, approach to writing, this is the kind of stuff we're talking about. Now, every poet will also use metaphors. And metaphors, of course, are examples of figurative language. And figurative language simply means you're writing in symbols. And you'll often get English teachers who are, if I can be, blunt, a pain in the hole, pedantic, going on about the difference between symbols and metaphors. Metaphors are symbols which are designed to represent ideas. They're designed to be thought-provoking, and they are for me, one of the most enriching aspects of poetry, because they challenge me as a reader to understand or decipher meaning. The quality of metaphors adds a depth and a substance to writing, which rewards repeated reading and allows for a variety of interpretations. So that's, the kind of wording that will allow you to explain why you enjoy whatever poet's use of metaphor. Good example is Kavanagh. I mean, every poet uses metaphor. Good example of Kavanagh. One of my favourite poems is Advent. In fact, it's one of the very few poems that has its own. If I was to turn the camera, I'm not going to now, but to the wall over here, it's on the wall over here. Love the poem. It means a lot to me. But he, in that poem, talks about how, after he's gone through this attitude shift, where he stops overthinking things and just looks for and accepts the beauty of the world. He says that, there'll be the why of heartbreaking strangeness in dreeping hedges. I was probably 13 or 14 when I read that for the first time. I just went, what? Wow. And both of those words, what the fuck does that mean? But also, wow, what a line. The symbolism is remarkable. The images are complex. There's heartbreaking strangeness in a hedge. The use of the word dreeping instead of drooping, which brings up images of weeping with joy. Interesting and emblematic of Kavanagh's belief that true wonder can be found in the appreciation of everyday beauty and the miraculous quality of nature. Now, again, that's me trying to show you how you can take something and explain it. But the crucial thing is that idea of a metaphor being emblematic of something, and of it being complex and challenging, but also interesting. So that's the kind of language you want to use. You can't mention metaphor. I mean, you have Yeats on your course. You have John Donne in your course. You've got Bishop. They're all like freaks of nature writers. And they were all brilliant. But like Dickinson was, if I could say, like Dickinson was, Shakespeare rocks my world, man. See that whole shelf there? See the whole shelf? That's all Shakespeare. But Dickinson comes close. She was amazing. And she did make adroit use of metaphor and symbolism in every poem she wrote. She was so precise, so concise. And I think one of my favourite examples is her description in the poem After a Great Pain of Formal Feeling Comes of quartz contentment. Think about what quartz is. It's a metamorphic rock. So it used to be something else. Then it came under great stress and pressure, and then it was fundamentally changed. Never, ever to be what it was again. And that's what the impact of trauma has. I just finished a book about Dickinson, and I'm actually going to go back and read it again. It's superb. And so she was a master of metaphor, and it's a symbol that the poet uses to convey, complex or, subtle points in a striking and often challenging way. And the thing about metaphors is they have to be deciphered. They have to be understood. And that idea of having to, understand or decipher the meaning, it really does add a substance to poetry, which rewards repeated reading, as I said up here. And of course allows for a variety of interpretations, because poetry is, if your English teacher tells you this is what it means, your English teacher's lying to you. What your English teacher should always say is, this is what I think it means. Alliteration, easy one, creates rhythm. And you see it in all the poets' work. And what are you going to say about alliteration? It often serves to heighten a particular sequence or image and draws the reader attention. Look for opening lines in particular. So a great example is Advent. I could quote 1,000 examples from Shakespeare. Fair is foul and foul is fair. There's a great example of alliteration. But when Kavanagh opens Advent with, we have tested and tasted too much, lover. What an impactful line that is. And obviously you have the contrast between the analytical and the physical with tested and tasted. The gustatory image of tasted, but you've also got that T sound. Tested, tasted too. Draws the reader to the line. Very clever. Allusions. These are references to knowledge which are not explained or contextualized. You can have biblical allusions, so to the Bible. Classical allusions to Greek or Roman, or ancient learning. Historical allusions to events in the past. Allusions to literature, to Shakespeare, popular culture, music. Allusions can be to anything at all. The crucial thing is there are references which aren't explained. So if you understand the reference, there's something nice about that. It adds a subtle depth to the poem. And the other thing is, if you don't understand the allusion, it challenges you to go and find out what it references, what it means. So why is Derek Mahan's poem Ecclesiastes called Ecclesiastes? That's a biblical allusion. There's a great example. But probably my favourite example is Hearth Lesson by the wonderful Paula Meehan. Paula Meehan, how is it that Paula Meehan exists and people don't know her name? Like she should be, we are in the society in which we live today, in which everything is about grasping for material gain. And I'm tired. I love her. She's a good example of the type of society, the type of people, leaders that we need. Anyway, in Hearth Lesson, she writes, I am crouched, thinking about her childhood. I am crouched by the fire in the flat in Sean McDermott Street, while Zeus and Hera battle it out. Now, not only is that a great classical allusion, it's also a great example of something I'm going to mention in a moment called juxtaposition. So you have this flat in Sean McDermott Street, this very ordinary place, and then there's two gods in it. So that striking contrast just grabs your attention. But of course, if you don't know who Zeus and Hera is, you have to figure it out. That's a classical allusion. And the reference to Zeus and Hera, these powerful gods, they were husband and wife, and they were always at war. And one of the reasons they were at war was because Zeus was constantly unfaithful. So that reference to that quality in that relationship hints at something to do with her parents' relationship, but she doesn't explain it. It just, it adds a richness to the imagery. And, it is true that kids look up at their parents and often, see their parents as flawless, godlike. And that's... it's a brilliant poem, and it's a brilliant classical allusion which adds such depth to the imagery. Sibilance, that's the repetition of the S sound, and it creates rhythm. Repetition of any sound creates rhythm. Alliteration, consonants, assonance. But sibilance can also be used to convey a hushed, quiet or tense atmosphere. I mentioned Mahan's Ecclesiastes, and one of the great examples is when he describes the dank churches, the empty streets, the shipyard silence, the tied up swings of a Sunday in Belfast when he was a child. It's just haunting and just incredibly involving and immersive, that line. And it's the repetition of those S sounds creates this hushed, quiet, haunting, tense atmosphere. And then of course you have the incredible symbolism of the tied up swings. There's something wrong there, isn't there, in that image? Onomatopoeia stimulates the aural or auditory sense. Don't forget you've got 5 senses. I read a book recently which told me I have 37. We'll stick with 5. And of course, when a writer can appeal to, I must do the map. I have a mind map on aesthetic language. I must do a video on it. But as you know, the more senses a piece of writing appeals to, so we have the visual sense, the aural or auditory sense, the gustatory sense, the sense of taste, the olfactory sense, which is the sense of smell, and then the haptic or the haptic image, which or sense, which is a sense of touch. The more a writer can appeal to a variety of senses, the more depth there is, the more immersive a piece of writing is. And usually, really good writers will appeal at least to the visual and to the aural or auditory sense. Derek Mahan, again, good example. I could pick examples from any of these poets. Rattling by Derek Mahan is a particularly atmospheric poem. I love that poem so much. As I get older, it means more to me as well. Anyway, you don't care. But in that poem, he talks of the whistle and the chatter of the birds of the island. These crazy lines where he talks about the oniric species, dreamlike nature reserve of the island. But the whistle and chatter, you can hear the sounds of the birds. But then he also, when he flashes back to the past, and he talks about the screams of the rattling women, and then he talks about the roar of the sea. Like, it's aural. You can hear those sounds, those noises, and they're calming at one stage, and then disturbing and powerful at another stage. So that's onomatopoeia, and they all do it. Every single one of your poets does it. Have examples prepared. Poets often employ meter, which is simply rhythm. It's a way of creating meter. I am is a pair of syllables where first syllable is unstressed, second syllable is stressed. That's the most common one. I can never pronounce the word trochaic, is where they use trochees, or where the first syllable is stressed and the second syllable isn't. It's less frequently used, but don't even use the words I am or trochaic. Just use meter. Just talk about meter. And if you want to talk about specific meters, dimeter, that's 4 syllabic beats. Trimeter is 6 syllabic beats. Tetrameter is 8. Pent is 10, because it's di is 2 pairs, tri is 3 pairs, tet is 4 pairs, pent is 5 pairs. And just learn the phrase that that meter adds rhythm and fluency and sometimes a musical quality to a poem, which makes it more involving and engaging and interesting to read. Just look at any of the poets, Bishop, Yeats, Dickinson, Donne, you'll see meter. Hyperbole, deliberate exaggeration, often employed to convey emphasis or contribute a light-hearted, playful tone. John Donne's poetry is notable for his use of hyperbole. I don't know if you know the poem Song Go and Catch a Falling Star. The whole thing is an exercise in hyperbole. But the sun rising is also a good example. By the way, you see the way I wrote the sun in those two spellings? It doesn't matter a damn whether you spell it as it was originally spelled when the poem was published, or whether you spell it with the modern spelling. Some teacher tells you it does matter. I think that teacher must work in an amazing school where students are very, very, very talented and has got little to be worried about. Anyway, when Donne says at the end of that poem that the sun, if it shines here to us, it is everywhere. Shine here to us and thou art everywhere. This bed thy centre is, these walls thy sphere. That's hyperbole. It's also a metaphor. You know, there's all these things interlink. Symbolism. But like, that's deliberate exaggeration. It doesn't make any sense if you think about it literally. That if it shines to one place, it's everywhere. So there's a paradox there. And he's using the hyperbole in the paradox to, emphasize that at this particular moment in his life, this woman, whoever she is, the subject of the poem, see that there? That she is his world. So saying that the sun shining in this one spot illuminates the whole world, that is an example of exaggeration, deliberate exaggeration. It's playful. It's also emphasizing his feelings for the woman. It's great, lovely, beautiful. Juxtaposition. One of my particular, I'm always talking, if you're in my classes, I'm always talking about, look at that juxtaposition, because it's just so striking. You take two contrasting things, highlight and put them side by side to highlight a point. Stimulates the imagination, draws your attention to a particular point, a message or image. There's, again, a million examples. I love Meehan's Death of a Field, and, those dandelion, flash, dock, pledge, teasel, aerial, primrose, brillo, thistle, bounce, slow, oxy action. And what's she doing there? She's juxtaposing the natural with the artificial, posing a question, I suppose. What are we losing and what are we gaining as we destroy nature? Oxymoron, an apparently paradoxical statement, something that shouldn't make sense, or noun-adjective combination, which in a particular set of circumstances makes sense. So I suppose there's loads of oxymorons in poetry. Donne's poetry features them. So does Bishop's. So does Adrian Rich. So does I'm trying to think of somebody else. There is somebody else. Yeats. And Yeats brilliantly describes the Easter Rising as a terrible beauty. How can something be both terrible and beauty? See the line? Terrible beauty. How is that possible? Well, it is possible. It sounds like a contradiction in terms, but actually it makes sense because it's a noun adjective combination which captures the conflict that lies within him. When he thinks about the rising, he has mixed feelings. He admires the sacrifice, so that's the beautiful thing, but he dreads the precedent that it sets. Violence begets violence. He's afraid of what's coming. He captures that when he says terrible beauty is born. That's a oxymoron. Finally, repetition, we all know, creates emphasis, draws the reader's attention to the importance of a particular image, message, or thematic concern. Adrian Rich is one of the great poets of the 20th century. I'm so lucky I do the job I do because I get to read this stuff. I'm honest enough to say I probably wouldn't read a lot of this stuff if it wasn't my work. But I'm very lucky that it is my work. But at the end of Power, which is a properly brilliant poem by Rich, on the one level about Marie Curie, but not really about Marie Curie at all. It's about being a woman in a patriarchal society. But she says at the end of that poem, she doubles down on this phrase, denying her wounds. She says it twice, denying her wounds, denying her wounds. And of course that emphasizes the poet's point about the sacrifice and the suffering that women have to endure in order to be successful in a world controlled or dominated by men. And this idea that women sometimes don't accept that or deny that pain. So obviously she's playing on the idea that Marie Curie never accepted that her work as a scientist and her exposure to radioactive substances led to her painful death. But of course there's a metaphorical significance there as well. In order to achieve greatness, pain has to be endured, and there's no point in denying it. So there you go. I hope you found that in some way useful. I'm going to try and do another couple of these tomorrow morning when the kids are asleep, and I hope you have a lovely Easter.